The Cardassian warship loomed against the backdrop of stars, its crystalline hull refracting light in mesmerizing patterns. Commander Sarah Chen stood at attention on the bridge of the Earth vessel, Resilient, watching as first contact protocols went spectacularly wrong. The aliens had responded to their greeting with immediate hostility, not because of any perceived threat, but because they couldn't fathom how such defenseless creatures could have achieved space travel. "Your species is an evolutionary mistake," the Cardassian commander's translated voice crackled through the comm system. His crystalline form shifted, fragments of his outer shell catching the light. "No natural armor, no redundant organs, no defensive capabilities whatsoever. How did you even survive long enough to leave your atmosphere?" Sarah maintained her composure, though she couldn't help but smile slightly. It wasn't the first time humanity had been underestimated, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. "Perhaps," she replied, "you're looking at defense from the wrong perspective." The Caraxian's crystalline form pulsed with what their xenobiologists interpreted as derisive amusement. "Wrong perspective? Your soft flesh tears easily. Your bones break. Your organs are vulnerable. These are not matters of perspective, they are biological facts." "Then let me offer you a demonstration," Sarah proposed, noting how her bridge crew straightened with pride. They knew what was coming. "Send your strongest warrior aboard. Let them witness human fragility firsthand." The Caraxians agreed eagerly, too quickly. Their warrior, when it materialized on the Resilience bridge, stood nearly 3 meters tall. Its crystalline body was arranged in overlapping plates that could withstand the vacuum of space. Even its joints were protected by smaller, interlocking crystals that moved with surprising grace. Sarah stepped forward, removing her uniform jacket to reveal the standard-issue tank top beneath. The Cardassian warrior's crystalline structure vibrated with what their xenobiologists had tagged as laughter. "Strike me," Sarah ordered, spreading her arms. "Full strength." The warrior hesitated, its crystalline form shifting uncertainly. "You will die. Try me." The blow came fast, a crystalline arm swinging with enough force to shatter steel. It connected with Sarah's abdomen, and the sound made several Cardassian observers flinch. Sarah grunted, stumbled back 2 steps, then straightened. A bruise was already forming, but she smiled. "Again," she commanded. The warrior struck again, and again. Each blow would have crippled most known species. Sarah took them all. Yes, there was pain. Yes, there would be bruises. But she remained standing, her vital organs protected by layers of muscle, her bones absorbing impacts that would shatter most materials. "Impossible," the warrior stepped back, its crystalline structure vibrating with confusion. "You should be broken." Sarah rolled her shoulders, wincing slightly but still very much alive. "Humans don't break easily. We bend, we bruise, we bleed, but we recover. While your species evolved armor, we evolved something far more valuable, adaptability." She gestured to her already darkening bruises. "In a few days, these will be gone. If you broke my bones, they would knit themselves back together, often stronger than before. We heal, we adapt, we overcome. Our bodies are constantly repairing, strengthening, improving." The Cardassian commander's voice crackled through the comm again, but this time without its previous derision. "You mean to tell us that your species' defense is not in preventing damage, but in recovering from it?" "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "Humanity's strength isn't in our ability to deflect harm, it's in our ability to endure it, learn from it, and come back stronger. We don't need crystal armor or redundant organs. We have something better, resilience." The warrior touched one of Sarah's bruises with a crystalline appendage, amazed at how the skin had already begun its healing process. "But the pain. Pain is information," Sarah explained. "It teaches us our limits, then helps us push beyond them. Every time we recover, we adapt. Every injury makes us stronger, every challenge makes us smarter. That's how we made it to the stars. The Cardassian commander was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his tone had changed completely. Perhaps we have much to learn from each other. Our armor makes us strong, but it also makes us rigid. Unchanging. Your adaptability, it is a different kind of strength. Sarah nodded, finally allowing herself to rub her sore abdomen. That's why we're out here, Commander. Not to prove our superiority, but to learn from each other's strengths. Your armor is remarkable, but sometimes the strongest material isn't the one that never breaks, but the one that can always repair itself. As the Cardassian warrior returned to their ship, Sarah could sense a shift in their relations. The initial hostility had been replaced by curiosity, perhaps even respect. It was a familiar pattern. Species that initially dismissed humans as soft and weak often came to realize that there were many different forms of strength. The bruises would fade in days, but the lesson would last much longer. Humanity's greatest defense wasn't in preventing damage, but in their remarkable ability to recover, adapt, and grow stronger from every challenge they faced. Dr. Marcus Rivera watched through reinforced glass as Cardassian scientists scurried around their laboratory, their crystalline forms catching the harsh light of their instruments. 3 weeks had passed since the initial confrontation, and humanity's strange biology had captured the aliens' fascination. What had begun as hostile disbelief had evolved into scientific curiosity. Beginning thermal stress test, announced Chief Researcher Crix, his crystalline form vibrating with barely contained excitement. Human subject has consented to temperature variation from 0 to 45 degrees Celsius. Marcus stood calmly in the testing chamber as the temperature plunged. The Cardassians watched in amazement as his body responded, blood vessels constricting, muscles shivering to generate heat, metabolism adjusting. Even as frost formed on the chamber walls, his core temperature remained stable. Remarkable, Crix muttered, his crystalline segments shifting in what Marcus had learned was their equivalent of head shaking. No protective shell, yet such complex internal regulation. As the temperature began to rise, Marcus felt his body shift gears. Sweat beaded on his skin, blood vessels dilated, and his breathing pattern changed. The Cardassian sensors tracked every adaptation with growing amazement. Your thermal regulation range exceeds most armored species, Crix noted, his tone betraying his disbelief. And you achieve this without any external protection? Marcus wiped sweat from his brow. Our bodies are constantly adjusting, finding balance. We don't just survive temperature changes, we acclimate to them. Given time, humans can adapt to live in almost any climate. The next test involved atmospheric pressure changes. While the Cardassians relied on their crystalline shells to withstand pressure differentials, human bodies proved remarkably adaptable. Their blood chemistry altered, oxygen absorption adjusted, and even their cells showed subtle changes to cope with the stress. But surely there must be a breaking point, insisted Assistant Researcher Vtal. All materials have limits. Marcus smiled. Of course we have limits. But they're not fixed points. They're more like guidelines. The remarkable thing about humans isn't that we can't break, it's that we can push those limits further each time we approach them. To demonstrate, he requested a strength assessment. The Cardassians watched in fascination as Marcus began lifting progressively heavier weights. With each session, despite muscle fatigue and strain, his capacity increased. What would have damaged most species' support structures instead triggered adaptation in human tissue. Your muscles aren't tearing? Vtal asked, her crystalline form shimmering with confusion. They are, microscopically, Marcus explained between lifts. But that's the point. Those tiny tears heal stronger than before. It's called hypertrophy, controlled damage that leads to enhancement. Crix's sensors whirred as they documented every physiological change. Your species intentionally damages itself to become stronger. This defies conventional biological defense theory. Because you're thinking of defense as preventing damage, Marcus said, setting down the weights. Humans evolved a different strategy. We don't try to stop damage completely, we get better at recovering from it. The implications slowly crystallized for the alien researchers. Every test they devised revealed new aspects of human adaptability. Exposure to mild toxins led to increased resistance. Bone stress resulted in higher density. Even radiation exposure, carefully controlled, triggered DNA repair mechanisms more efficient than any other known species. It's not just physical, Marcus continued, noting their growing understanding. Our brains exhibit remarkable plasticity too. Learning, memory, skill acquisition, they all follow the same pattern. Stress, recovery, adaptation, improvement. Crick's crystalline form pulsed with what Marcus had learned was their equivalent of deep thought. Your entire species is built on a foundation of controlled failure and recovery. While we evolved to prevent damage, you evolved to profit from it. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. Your crystalline forms are incredible, but they're also relatively static. Our softness is our strength. We're constantly changing, adapting, improving. The day's final test involved cellular regeneration. The Caraxians watched in amazement as sample human tissue demonstrated its remarkable healing capabilities. What would have been catastrophic damage to their crystalline forms was, for human cells, simply another opportunity for renewal. Perhaps, Crix concluded, his tone thoughtful, we have been too quick to dismiss biological strategies different from our own. Your species' approach is elegant in its own way. Not prevention, but adaptation. Not resistance, but recovery. Marcus nodded, already feeling his muscles beginning their repair process from the day's exertions. That's humanity's real strength. We don't just survive challenges, we grow stronger because of them. Every stress, every strain, every near breaking point is just another opportunity for improvement. As he prepared to leave the laboratory, Marcus caught his reflection in the crystalline walls. The Caraxians saw a soft, vulnerable form. But he saw what evolution had spent millions of years perfecting, a system so adaptable that even its weaknesses became strengths, a body that didn't just endure but thrived on challenge, and a species that had turned recovery into an art form. The Caraxians had evolved to resist the universe's hardships. Humans had evolved to embrace them, and in doing so, had achieved something remarkable, the ability to become stronger precisely because of their apparent fragility. Captain Maya Patel crouched behind a fallen pillar on the mining colony of Nexus 7, her breathing steady despite the chaos around her. Beside her, a Cardassian warrior named Star shifted nervously, his crystalline form catching the red emergency lights. They were part of a joint response team facing an unexpected threat, a silicon-based hive organism that was consuming everything in its path. Their outer shell is too dense, Star reported, his crystalline segments clicking in frustration. Our weapons barely scratch them. Even my people's natural armor can't withstand their corrosive touch. Maya checked her tactical display. The hive creatures were spreading through the lower levels, their crystalline bodies similar to the Caraxians but corrupted, twisted into weapons. They had already lost 3 Cardassian warriors, their magnificent armor dissolved by the creatures' acids. Then we stopped trying to break them, Maya said, a plan forming in her mind. Sometimes the best defense isn't about being harder or stronger. Sometimes it's about being flexible. She tapped her comm unit. All human units, switch to sonic disruptors. Cardassian allies, focus on evacuation. Zdar's form pulsed with confusion. Sonic weapons. Against crystalline entities. Maya smiled. Everything has a resonance frequency. You just have to find it. She switched frequencies. Dr. Rivera, what's your analysis of the hive's crystalline structure? Marcus's voice came through clear. Similar to Cardassian crystal but more rigid. Natural frequency should be between 372 and 389 Hz. They sacrificed flexibility for strength. Perfect, Maya responded. Their strength is their weakness. All units, calibrate to 380 Hz and prepare for synchronized burst. The human soldiers moved into position, their relatively unprotected bodies allowing them to slip through gaps that the armored Caraxians couldn't manage. Where the aliens saw vulnerability, Maya saw advantage. Humans could contort, squeeze, and adapt their movements in ways the crystalline beings couldn't comprehend. "Ready," Maya called out. "On my mark, now." The sonic burst was devastating. The hive creatures, for all their impressive armor, began to vibrate uncontrollably. Cracks appeared in their crystalline forms, spreading like lightning across their surfaces. Within minutes, the entire hive structure was compromising itself, shattering under its own rigid strength. Star watched in amazement. You didn't need to be stronger than them, he realized. You just needed to turn their strength against them. Exactly, Maya confirmed, helping him secure the area. Humans learned long ago that being the hardest or most armored isn't always the answer. Sometimes being able to bend is better than being unbreakable. As they worked to clear the colony, Maya explained further. Look at human martial arts. Many of our most effective fighting techniques use an opponent's strength against them. We learn to redirect force rather than just absorb it. To flow around obstacles rather than always trying to break through them. The Caraxian warrior observed the human teams moving through the debris, their bodies twisting and adapting to each challenge. Where his people needed to create paths, the humans found ways through existing spaces. Their apparent fragility allowed them to succeed where armor would have been a hindrance. Your species continues to surprise us, Star admitted. We thought your lack of natural armor was a disadvantage, but you've turned it into a different kind of strength. Maya nodded, helping a fellow soldier navigate a particularly tight space. That's the thing about evolution. Every adaptation comes with trade-offs. Your crystalline armor is incredible, but it limits your flexibility. Humans traded armor for adaptability, and we've never regretted it. The cleanup operation continued through the night. Human teams worked alongside Caraxian warriors, each species contributing their unique strengths. The Caraxians' armor allowed them to handle hazardous materials safely, while the humans' flexibility let them reach areas that would have been inaccessible to their crystalline allies. As dawn broke over the colony's dome, Maya and Zdar stood watching the sunrise through the reinforced windows. The Caraxian's crystalline form reflected the light in beautiful patterns, while Maya's skin simply absorbed the warmth. Perhaps, Zdar said thoughtfully, true strength isn't about being unbreakable. Perhaps it's about finding the right balance between resistance and adaptation. Maya smiled. That's humanity's gift. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most armored species in the galaxy. But we might be the most adaptable. And in a universe full of challenges, that's a pretty good trait to have. The mission had proven something important. In the face of universal threats, different evolutionary strategies could complement each other perfectly. The Caraxians' living crystal and humanity's adaptive flesh weren't opposing approaches to survival, they were different solutions to the same challenge of existence. The massive arena on Caraxian Prime glittered like a geode, its crystalline walls refracting sunlight in dazzling patterns. Lieutenant James Chin stood at the starting line alongside representatives from 12 different species, each evolved to survive in their own unique way. The first interstellar survival championships had drawn competitors from across known space. The human has no protective modifications, a Vitulian observer noted, their metallic scales gleaming. Not even basic dermal reinforcement. This seems unwise. The Caraxian announcer's voice boomed through the arena. Welcome to the endurance trials. Each competitor must complete a series of challenges designed to test the limits of their species' evolutionary adaptations. James rolled his shoulders, feeling the easy movement of muscle and bone. Around him, other competitors adjusted their natural and artificial armor. The Draconids with their plasma-resistant scales, the Mechnoids with their titanium exoskeletons, and the Caraxians themselves with their living crystal forms, all seemed far better equipped for what lay ahead. The first challenge was environmental resistance. The arena's segments shifted, subjecting different sections to extreme conditions. Acid rain fell in one zone, while another became a furnace of plasma energy. A third zone dropped to near absolute zero. James watched as his armored competitors charged through, their various protective layers deflecting or absorbing the environmental hazards. He took a different approach. Where they pushed through, he navigated around. Where they endured, he adapted. His body's natural temperature regulation, combined with careful movement and tactical thinking, allowed him to progress without relying on heavy protection. Fascinating, the Vitulian observer commented. The human is using the environment itself for protection. The second challenge tested impact resistance. Mechanical hammers swung from multiple angles, while projectiles shot across the arena. The armored competitors stood their ground, letting their protective layers absorb the blows. James instead read the patterns, his flexible body allowing him to dodge and weave. When hits were unavoidable, he rolled with them, dispersing the force rather than trying to block it entirely. Notice how the human's soft tissue actually aids in impact absorption, the announcer explained. What appears to be vulnerability becomes an advantage. But it was the third challenge, the endurance run, where humanity's true strength became apparent. Hour after hour, the competitors pressed on through increasingly difficult terrain. One by one, the heavily armored participants began to falter. Their protective layers, while excellent at preventing damage, required enormous energy to move. James kept running. His body adapted to the strain, blood vessels expanding, muscles operating at peak efficiency, sweat regulating his temperature perfectly. Where others fought against exhaustion, his body was designed for persistent activity. Remarkable, a Cardassian scientist observed. The human's energy efficiency is extraordinary. Their apparent fragility masks incredible endurance. The final challenge was simple but brutal: maintain activity until exhaustion. No armor could prevent fatigue. No protective layer could stop the burning of muscles or the depletion of energy reserves. As the hours stretched on, the arena revealed the trade-offs of evolution. The heavily armored competitors, for all their impressive protection, succumbed to exhaustion. Their very defenses became burdens. But James continued, his body constantly adjusting, finding new reserves of energy, adapting its systems to maintain homeostasis. This is what humanity offers the galaxy, James explained afterward, his voice tired but steady. We don't just endure, we adapt. Every challenge we face changes us, makes us better prepared for the next one. The Vitulian observer's metallic scales shifted thoughtfully. Your species chose a remarkable path. Instead of evolving impenetrable defenses, you developed an almost unlimited capacity for adaptation and recovery. It wasn't really a choice, James smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. Earth threw everything it had at us: predators, climate changes, natural disasters. The ones who survived weren't those who could deflect everything. They were the ones who could take a hit and keep going, who could learn from each challenge and come back stronger. The games concluded with a profound realization rippling through the assembled species. The human body, seemingly so vulnerable, represented a different kind of evolutionary success. Not the ability to prevent all damage, but the capacity to become stronger because of it. As James accepted his medal, standing alongside his armored competitors, he embodied a truth about human nature. In a universe that constantly tested the limits of survival, humanity had evolved not to resist change, but to thrive on it. Their softness wasn't a weakness, it was the very thing that made them unbreakable. The grand archives of Cardassian Prime sparkled like a constellation brought to Earth, its crystalline spires housing the combined knowledge of dozens of spacefaring species. Dr. Elena Santos stood before the Council of Evolutionary Studies, her presence marking the first time a human had been invited to address this prestigious body. The assembled scholars, beings of crystal, metal, energy, and forms beyond easy description, watched as she activated the holographic display. Images of human cellular structure floated in the air, dancing with complexity that belied their apparent simplicity. For years, Elena began, you've studied humanity's apparent vulnerability as an evolutionary puzzle. Today, I'm here to show you that what you've seen as our greatest weakness is actually our greatest achievement. The display shifted, showing human tissue at the microscopic level actively repairing itself. Every species in this room evolved remarkable defenses. The Caraxians developed living crystal, the Vetulians their adaptive metalloid scales, the Xiphons their energy fields. All incredible achievements of evolution. She paused, letting the images shift to show human healing in action. But humanity? We evolved something different. Something that, at first glance, seems like a failure of natural selection. We remained soft. Vulnerable. Easily damaged. But in doing so, we gained something extraordinary. The display expanded, showing human cellular adaptation in real time. Our bodies are in a constant state of renewal. Every injury, every strain, every challenge triggers not just repair, but improvement. We don't just heal, we adapt. We don't just survive, we evolve. A Caraxian scholar's crystalline form shimmered with interest. But surely the energy cost of such constant renewal must be enormous? Elena smiled. Actually, it's remarkably efficient. Instead of maintaining heavy armor or complex defensive systems, our bodies invest energy in adaptation and improvement. We're literally designed to become stronger through adversity. The images shifted again, showing human physiology under various types of stress. When we lift weights, our muscles don't just repair the damage, they build back stronger. When we're exposed to pathogens, our immune system doesn't just fight them off, it remembers them, becoming more efficient at dealing with similar threats in the future. When we face environmental challenges, our bodies don't just endure, they adapt to function better under those conditions. A Vetulian representative leaned forward, their metallic scales catching the light. You're suggesting that your species' apparent vulnerability is actually a sophisticated evolutionary strategy? Exactly, Elena confirmed. Think about it, what's more advantageous in the long term? Being impervious to damage but unable to improve, or being able to turn every challenge into an opportunity for enhancement? The display showed a final series of images, human achievements across history, from early tool use to space exploration. Our softness forced us to become smart. Our vulnerability drove us to innovate. Our apparent weakness became the foundation of our greatest strength, the ability to adapt, improve, and overcome any challenge we face. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Elena continued, her voice filled with quiet pride. We're not just surviving despite our lack of natural armor, we're thriving because of it. Evolution didn't fail us. It gave us exactly what we needed, the ability to never stop growing stronger. The Xiphon Elder, a being of pure energy, spoke next. Your species has turned adaptation itself into a defense mechanism. Rather than evolving a single, static solution to survival, you evolved the ability to continuously find new solutions. Elena nodded. That's humanity's true strength. We're not unchanging, we're not invulnerable, and we're certainly not perfect. But we are perfectly designed to become better. Every challenge we face, every obstacle we overcome, every limit we push, they all make us stronger. As her presentation concluded, the council chamber buzzed with discussion. They had finally understood what made humans unique in the galaxy. Not their technology, not their intelligence, but their fundamental nature, biological systems designed to turn adversity into advantage. Perhaps, the Caraxian High Scholar announced, their crystalline form resonating with new understanding, we have all been too quick to judge evolutionary success by our own standards. The human approach, this constant adaptation, this endless capacity for improvement, represents something we had not considered, that true resilience might lie not in preventing damage, but in the ability to grow stronger because of it. Elena gathered her materials, satisfied that her message had been received. Humanity's place in the galaxy was secure not despite their apparent weakness, but because of it. They were evolution's masterpiece, not perfect, but perfectly adaptable. Not invulnerable, but ultimately unbreakable. As she left the Grand Archives, the crystalline spires catching the light of an alien sun, Elena reflected on the irony. In a universe full of species that had evolved to resist change, humanity had evolved to embrace it. And in doing so, they had achieved something remarkable. They had become the species that didn't need armor because they had something better. The ability to never stop becoming stronger.